Waking up the next morning, we then see Ben stretching, letting Gwen sleep in, as he went to get changed and cleaned up, preparing breakfast and just relaxing and enjoying the morning as it was a beautiful day. Gwen had slowly started to wake up from the smell of breakfast and walked downstairs, still a bit sleepy, as she saw they had food already on the table, so he was probably just finishing up the last of it at the stove. She walked over to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, telling him that it smelled delicious, and he turned around smiling and kissed her, telling Gwen good morning, teasingly calling her Mrs. Tennyson as he did so, and she smiled in response to that, leaning up and kissing his cheek before going to sit at the table. He handed Gwen her drink as she began sipping on it, saying that was better, and then he'd put the last of breakfast on the table and they began to enjoy the food, which was delicious as always. They had started talking about their plans for the honeymoon, and Ben had told her that he was able to get Maggie to approve everything. Gwen then asked Ben how he managed to convince her of them getting to tour the galaxy and take time off, as usually only a couple of weeks were honeymoon standard. He then responds that Maggie wanted to test out an idea of free-roaming plumbers that traveled around helping out where they could. Ben explains that he volunteered to test the idea for a while in exchange for being allowed to take as much time for their honeymoon as they wanted, so they get to tour the galaxy for as long as they want and occasionally help out, then report back to Maggie how it went once they get back home to Earth. The rest of the time, they are free to do as they please. She nodded hearing that, and the two continued eating, enjoying their breakfast. Then Gwen went on to get herself cleaned up and ready to get going, as Ben cleaned up the kitchen, then went to finish getting his stuff together for the trip, which they'd already packed for mostly, so had Gwen though. They got finished getting ready and getting their stuff together, and then after making sure the door was locked, they then got into the car and began to drive on off to go to the base where the ship had been kept parked. Getting there, they found the other plumbers waving come to see them off. They went to chat with Grandpa and the others before they headed off, as they could see that the supplies were still being loaded for them. Finding Rook with Max in the main area as they began chatting, with Max asking if they were excited for the honeymoon, with Ben responding that they were, and looked over towards Rook. Ben tells Rook that he'd like him to keep an eye on Albedo. It's his turn to play the role of senior partner and teacher. Rook looked surprised hearing Ben saying that to him, but nodded in agreement to that, saying that he would do his best to teach them how to be a plumber just as Ben had taught him. Max says that Rook's done great around there, and that he'd sent the recommendation to the main branch to have Rook take the Magister's test. Rook said that he was far from being as ready as Ben was, but Ben tells him that he'll be fine. Gwen says that they had to be a skilled plumber to keep up with Ben for this long anyway. Rook thanked them for their kind words, and noticing the time, told them that the ship should be ready for them to head into space, as the last of the cargo manifest should be finished right about now. And the group go on over to the ship, saying that they were ready. It was a modified plumber standard ship designed for long travels, but nothing all that special overall. Ben drove the car on inside and put it in place and started locking it down to make sure it was secure, just in case there were any places that they would need to drive. Then went back onto the cargo hatch opening, with Gwen hugging Max, telling them bye and calling him Grandpa, as they then went over to where Ben was standing, and the two waved as the hatch closed. Once the hatch was closed, Ben then stretched and they went to find the bridge of the ship, giving all the systems a once over. Finding that they were up and ready, he told Gwen to strap in because they were about to take off. After the two were sat, the launching sequence was started at the base for them to get going. After they'd taken off into the sky and eventually made their way into space, they turned and watched Earth off in the distance, with Gwen saying that the Earth was beautiful from space, with Ben agreeing with that, as the two of them relaxed and he'd kissed her before activating the artificial gravity so they could walk around the ship. Once they were out to space, Ben asked Gwen where she wanted to go first. They could visit anywhere in the Milky Way or beyond. She smiled, getting an idea, telling Ben that since they were touring the universe, why don't they go visit some friends, and he'd nodded, liking the idea, saying that they could hit up Kevin first. He was the closest to them. Gwen liked that idea, saying that they could tease him about missing the wedding of the universe, making Ben laugh, as he began working on one of the consoles, telling her that it was setting a course now, as the image of Saturn appeared on the map, with a drawn line leading towards it. Ben says that it will take at least an Earth day's time to get to Saturn in the ship, and suggested that maybe they should start checking around the ship to learn where everything was. With a nod from Gwen, the two went off to locate everything they needed to check out.